Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hannah Morrison. I'm on the Mobility Innovations team with the Portland Bureau of Transportation, here to talk to you about EV charging in the public right-of-way. I wanted to start with just giving a bit of an overview of our transportation electrification strategy. Then I'll talk about some of our policy work and wrap up with a project that is active right now. So generally, we've got several policy mandates that guide the city in pursuing electrification. We have been working on this for a very long time, dating back to our 2015 Climate Action Plan. And we have really built in kind of signals and policy into several of our plans here. And then I also just wanted to address, we have this triangle in the middle here. This is how we really think about transportation decarbonization as a city as a whole. So we have three main strategies that we are pursuing for transportation decarbonization. One of them is reducing the miles driven, really getting that mode shift to get people on bikes and in transit. Another one is planning and building connected communities, just making it easier to get around so that everything is nearby. And then at the end, we do acknowledge there are going to be vehicles still on the streets. There will be miles that remain. And if we want to achieve our transportation decarbonization goals and achieve that 50% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030, we really have to work to electrify all those miles that remain. And that brings me to we have a toolbox of transportation electrification strategies. We have several ways that we are trying to electrify all those miles that remain. So the top left is an EV charger in an apartment building. That is one of the sites from our EV Ready Code project. This was something our Bureau of Planning and Sustainability led. They passed code updates a couple years ago. So all new multifamily housing or mixed-use apartments that have more than 5 dwellings actually have to be built during construction with conduit underground under the parking lot, so that it makes it a lot easier to just install the EV charger in the parking lot once people are ready for that. The next picture is Electric Avenue downtown, near and dear to many people's hearts, as I've heard today. It's one of our fast charging sites, one of Portland General Electric's in our public right-of-way. It's a partnership there. And it is, to my knowledge, the first DC fast charging site in the public right-of-way in the US when we established it in 2011. And no one's corrected me on that yet, so we will keep claiming that. And then we also have a cord cover allowance. So if you live in a single family home and you don't have a garage or a driveway and need to charge your EV, you are allowed to run an electric charging cord across the sidewalk, provided that you use an ADA compliant cord cover and meet a couple other guidelines that are on our website. Really, one of our goals here is to just make it easier for people to charge their EV. And so this is something we saw people doing, and we just wanted to bring them into compliance, make sure they're just keeping it safe for pedestrians and everyone else on the street. And then we have our EV charging at the curbside charging policy on the right here. This is a charger that is mounted on a utility pole. This is something that Portland General Electric and Pacific Power are doing. This was a pilot charger installed on Southeast Clinton and 19th, I believe, in 2020. And it was PGE's most widely utilized level 2 charger in their network during the pandemic. So they saw very high success with the curbside kind of neighborhood-focused charging. And then on the bottom, I just wanted to also shout out, we have a lot of other electric modes in the city that we're working on. Our streetcar is fully electric. TriMet is working to electrify their buses. And we have 2 shared micromobility fully electric systems, our bike share and scooter share. And then, thinking about why we're doing this policy work, even without the tax credits that are sunsetting, we do still see EV sales increasing. You can see on the bottom, this is a chart from the Oregon Department of Energy, and we are just continuing to see increasing registrations of battery electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles. And so, we want to both address our goals of trying to shift people to EVs, but we also just have to acknowledge that the market is already heading that way, and we want to just make sure that we're taking care of Portlanders. The Oregon Department of Transportation did a pretty robust transportation infrastructure needs assessment to understand how can we support folks that are electrifying, and what do we need to do to kind of prepare for that future. So just for the city of Portland itself, ODOT estimated that we need another approximately 9,500 public chargers by 2035. This includes everything from the chargers that you see at Fred Meyer, chargers that will be, like in those private parking lots, as well as chargers that are curbside, like that utility pole mounted charger that I shared. So this is something we're keeping in mind where we're trying to encourage more charging. So one of the things that we do is working with EV charging companies and the utilities to just encourage them to install more charging stations generally. But we also realized that we could step in and be a little bit more involved and actually leverage the right-of-way to increase access to charging. And that's through our curbside charging program. So one of the reasons we did this is because access to public charging in Portland is not currently equitable. As you can see from this map, we have a lot of chargers clustered downtown. And then generally you get less and less access to public charging as you move to the outside of the city. And so when we're thinking about, adding new infrastructure to the right-of-way, changing parking designation to be e-charging, we felt like there had to be a really good reason for that. And one of the reasons here is really to push the market to move to have an equitably distributed charging network across the entire city that really supports all Portlanders. There are also very few chargers near a lot of multi-unit dwellings. A lot of the places where we don't see a lot of public charging infrastructure are areas where there are high concentrations of renters, high concentrations of apartment buildings. There also tend to be areas where there is not access to frequent transit or robust protected bicycle infrastructure. So a lot of these areas of the city are areas where people are going to continue driving for a lot longer than other areas of the city. And again, just to tie that back to our decarbonization goals, these are folks that we really need to help electrify if we're going to achieve those goals. One thing that's talked a lot about in charging is the chicken and the egg problem. If you see an area that has low EV adoption, the market is probably not going to go and install an EV charger there because they're not going to have high utilization rates. But if you live in an area without public charging, then you're probably not going to buy an EV because it might be difficult to electrify or to charge your vehicle. And so this kind of creates this cycle that just can keep going. But we really felt like this is a place where the city can jump in and intervene and break this cycle by actually creating clear city policy for public EV charging. And so I've spent a while doing our public right-of-way charging framework. We made some key decisions pretty early on that helped shape this framework and how we're thinking about curbside charging. One of the first is that the city will not own, operate, or maintain any EV chargers. When we started developing this program, the utilities, had just had that very successful pilot of curbside charging, which you see in that bottom picture there. They're very interested in providing curbside charging. We also have several EV charging companies that said that they were interested in providing curbside charging in Portland. So it felt like it made sense for us to act as a regulator and a permitter in the space and not as an owner and operator. Currently, we also only allow level 2 chargers, that medium speed, so not DC fast chargers, to be installed curbside. Frankly, it's just quite difficult to find an area with significant power for a DC fast charging, especially in a neighborhood street and not in a big parking lot. DC fast charging also is just most efficient when you install multiple chargers, and these chargers will just be one charger per block face, sometimes with 2 ports, so it might be 2 parking spaces, but they're going to be kind of dispersed around the neighborhood. There won't be big hubs on a neighborhood street. We are allowing both chargers mounted on utility poles and chargers on pedestals, which you see in the top picture. It's roughly the size of a parking kitty meter. We've also written our regulations to be really flexible and future focused. As many of you probably know, this is a space that is constantly evolving. There's a lot of new technology and innovation, and we wanted to support that innovation and not limit it. So when we wrote our equipment specs, we said that the company had to have a charger that is fit for purpose for curbside charging, not specifically a charger with a 25-foot long cable that could, because that would reach all the ports on all the sides of the vehicles. And this is allowing for new companies to come in that might have a charging model that we haven't seen yet. For example, there's one charging company that has installed a couple chargers in the US. They're bringing a European cordless model. So their charger looks to be like about the size of a bollard, and then people bring their own cords. So there's a lot of innovation there. So right now, we're just looking at pedestal and utility pole, but we are open to other chargers. So as I mentioned, we have our 2 local investor-owned utilities, PGE and Pacific Power. They're going to be installing chargers on utility poles. And then EV charging companies that have signed our contract will be allowed to install on the right-of-way. So If you're an EV charging company and you're interested in this, you can come talk to me. You need to obtain a franchise or a license for operating in the right-of-way, and then also sign what we call our master lease agreement. This is really that overarching contract I've already mentioned a few times. It sets equipment specifications, maintenance standards, data sharing, insurance and indemnification requirements. I think one thing that was really important for us thinking about allowing chargers at the curb is really the user experience. One thing we hear time and time again is that their chargers are, out of service or poorly maintained. So we have really strict maintenance requirements for our curbside chargers. And then we also, this is a relatively new program. So we wrote into our administrative rules when we updated that the program would be reevaluated after 250 permits are issued, just to give Portlanders a chance to provide feedback, tell us that they do or don't like where we're allowing chargers to be installed, and just reevaluate that. So EV chargers are allowed in the public right-of-way in, like I think I mentioned, kind of designated areas of the city. So we really wanted to focus on areas with a lot of multifamily, a lot of renters. So this map shows the designated centers. These are from our 2035 comprehensive plan. These are areas that are going to be more zoned for more highly dense uses. So like I said, those apartment buildings, commercial, mixed use zones. And so right now, a curbside charger has to be within one of these designated centers. We do currently exclude the central city. Over a third of the public chargers are downtown, and there are demands on the right-of-way to manage. So right now, we're not allowing chargers in the central city. And then once you're within a designated center, the charger has to be on a local service traffic street. This means that the charger has to be around the corner from a main street. So you're not going to see a curbside charger on Northeast Alberta or Southeast Hawthorne. It's going to be on one of the numbered streets just around the corner. And this is so that we can preserve those main streets for a protected bike lane, a bus-only lane, or even just to close down for a street fair and not impact charging. And then, charging has to be in an area where parking is currently allowed and just not conflict with other transportation uses. We also have a suite of clearance and accessibility requirements. So you can look at our administrative rule if you're very curious about that, but 25 feet from an intersection, 5 feet from a alleyway or driveway, kind of things like that. We worked very closely with our utility permitting team on that because that's really their area of expertise. We also put in some standards and requirements for designing for accessibility by all Portlanders. The U.S. Access Board has put out some guidelines and suggestions, and we really just followed what they've put out so far. And then for parking requirements, the spaces will be signed with that sign up there and then striped with a white box and they will be 24/7 EV charging only. Enforcement is largely going to be complaint-based, although of course where parking enforcement officers are out, they can look at that as well. And in areas where there is metered parking, you will pay for the parking through Parking Kitty and then pay for the charging at the charger separately. There will be time limits at these parking spaces during the day, probably 4 hours during the day, and then unlimited overnight. So if you're a renter and you live nearby, you can get a full charge overnight. And when we created our policy, some cities, have a list of dream locations that they want to see EV chargers get put in. We decided to say generally, this is where we want to see the EV chargers, and then utilities and EV charging companies can pick from within those guidelines. And then I just wanted to wrap up by talking about one of the projects that we're working on recently. So our Park and Charge grant. This is a Department of Energy grant that we partnered with both utilities on. So Portland General Electric and Pacific Power are kind of the major partners. And our goal is to develop a convenient, reliable, and affordable EV charging network that really fills those gaps from that picture, the map I showed earlier, that shows where charging is currently lacking. And really the focus here is if you live in an apartment building, we're trying to mimic as close as you can get to home charging as possible without having a garage or driveway through this program. And we're also partnering with some research and analysis partners and some nonprofits to support outreach and evaluation. So this will look, this is just with this project, we are kicking off our curbside charging policy with this project to really focus on equity. And so this picture is actually of a suburb of Portland. It's one of PGE's newest EV charging poles mounted on a utility pole. So the EV charger is installed about 10 to 15 feet off the ground. The cord drops down once you scan a QR code on the sign and start your charging session. As I've mentioned before, the space will be EV charging only, and it'll be signed and striped. For this project specifically, in addition to the location criteria that I talked about before, we're really focusing on being nearby to apartment buildings, being close to commercial corridors. The idea also is that in addition to supporting renters, if you're going out for dinner on Belmont or something and you're there for an hour or two, you can plug into one of these and get just a little boost on your battery. And how can you get involved? We are out there tabling for the rest of the afternoon. We have flyers with a link to a survey. So this is an image from the survey. We are collecting responses from Portlanders to understand where you want to see charging in the future. So as I mentioned, our location criteria is a little limited right now with just these designated centers. And we do have a chance to reevaluate our policy, and we want to hear from you all if we hit the mark on where we're allowing curbside charges right now, if we should expand our policy and allow curbside chargers in more areas of the city. This map will also be shared with the utilities and any EV charging companies that want to install curbside chargers later. So it just serves as a real-time kind of database of the demand of EV charging. And then we will continue to be tabling and going to neighborhood associations and district coalition meetings. So if any of you want us to come to your neighborhood association meeting, also we'll come give a presentation, and we have more information on all of that on our website. And that's it.